Welcome back to Third Phase of Moon. My name is Blake Cousins, and in this episode, we're going to release an amazing video sent to us by Open Minds TV at the UFO International Conference. Now let's take a look at this video right now. Help me welcome.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I want to thank Open Minds for giving me the opportunity to join all of you today. And what I'd like to do for you this morning is give you a brief overview of the project at work.
Amy, I want to show you through your sweater. And it's not a bad sweatshirt you're wearing. It's very cool. But this is a professional turn down, huh? Non-professional or something half-assed. Keep that phone up. Really? Have you seen that? Yeah, some people keep that phone up. Check that phone all the time. They're checking it out. Podcast. Russell Peters his phone on. Really? Try to answer a fucking whole podcast with Russell Peters without checking his tweets. What? Impossible. Impossible. He's checking things. Some just read off tweets and say, "Oh, people are talking about this." That's wild. I'm trying to get away from it if I can. I'll find times if I'm going to go eat now, I'll leave it in my phone in the car. Yes, power move. And I hadn't done that before I just started. And it's not even a natural choice I'm making. Almost, it's like something I need to do. Yeah, it's a chicken shit move. Right? You're scared. Scared to leave it in there. Yeah, I'm scared. Scared to leave that phone move so important. There is a thing. What if something important happens? Yeah, you know? But what is, do you think, like, when does that happen? Super rare. But if it did happen while your phone was in the car and somebody needed you, you feel terrible. Right. But you kind of just, it's the balance. It's so slippery. We didn't have any way to get in touch with them. Back in the day, you had to yell for help. Remember that? Yeah, not in Los Angeles. There's too many people yell for help. Someone like just help me in something else. I think it's, you know, something not good or something Arabic or something people fuck you up. Just make that up. I'm not sure. Honestly, I think I might have heard of that. Because I live in Westwood and it's very diverse over there. There's a lot of people, someone's yelling stuff in the street. Do you think, for real, do you think help means something bad in other languages? Is that real? Somebody told me hello means go to hell in like Greek or like not good, like something tick, like a tick, like blood sucking. Oh, really? Government or something like that. Let's start with one. Let's start with, should we do with hello first? Yeah, I think, because, and I just say things and I don't even know sometimes. Somebody just told me to say hello when I was young and I've been saying it my whole life. Well, what does help mean? Does help mean anything in another language? Is help a bad word in other languages? The word help means something that was not their word help. help means something in another language that
you're gonna have to word it. You're gonna have to word it uniquely, I think, because it's yeah, I don't even know anymore now.
it's translation.
Maybe in Arabic or something.
Does it have any sort of alternate meaning
Or whatever.
or visions?
Or whatever, you know.
And Arabic and like Hebrew, those old languages have the coolest letters.
Yeah.
The way they write things. Like you look at some old Hindu script or something like that. Like, why does that look so cool?
It seems like a mystery.
Yeah, man. Anytime, like, even Russian, you see Russian written out, you're like, whoa, look at the crazy little letters they have. Like, look at that. Like, this is like some alien writing.
Yeah. I'd be curious. I couldn't imagine having to learn some of the other languages, you know. Like I'm going to China next week, I'm going to Shanghai, and I'm like, it's basically just me looking around at different drawings, you know. Like as far as even the words go, it's gonna be.
I think they have a lot of stuff in English there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of countries where there's a lot of tourism, they just put stuff in English. English seems to be a language that most European countries, like most people know. You can kind of get by in Italy. You can kind of get by in Germany. You just speak English. It's really interesting, man, because I guess there's so much tourism. I guess everyone's worried about us because we have nuclear bombs. Everybody learned English.
And we travel a lot because we have more money here, probably, so we have the ability to go places, maybe. Do you like English?
I guess it's just because what we're accustomed to.
That's crazy.
Spicy food.
Yeah, it's just like, it took me out of my element, man. There was a couple of words off my, you know, I almost needed help.
Ancient characters look like, if you had a movie, like a science fiction movie, and in the movie they found a crashed UFO that had some writing on the I-beams or something like that, it would look like a lot of Asian writing. Like, what am I looking at?
Right, like aliens using.
Yeah, it might as well be alien writing if you don't know it.
Yeah, if there were alien writing, you think it's going to look more like something from Asian writing than it is from American writing.
Well, it'd be weird if it was like comic book font.
Yeah.
Like, that's a
or whatever.
It's like, wait a minute, aliens speak English? Yeah, bro, everybody is.
What if aliens were like a Boeing shuttle? What the hell, man?
That's the biggest mindfuck that I ever heard, was that because the size of infinity, not only is there another Theo Vaughn out there in the world, but because infinity is so big, I'm going to butcher this for sure.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit last time.
Did we? Everything you've ever done, someone has done the exact same things, the exact same work, down to the last. Gentlemen, we're live! Yeah, dude. Steve-O, ladies and gentlemen. Brian Rabbi in the house. Steve-O preparing himself for his long stretch in the pokey from mocking SeaWorld openly on top of a very dangerous sign. There's a video of you were streaming live while you fucked with the SeaWorld sign.
Well, there are two different ones. I had the highway sign where I changed his sucked, and then there's the one where I climbed up the 150-foot tall crane.
Okay, I think both of them made me shit my pants. One of them, we were watching it. Brian and I were watching it, and my toes were curling.
Oh, no, you were watching it live?
Lifting up. Yeah, we were watching it.
Weren't we watching it live?
No, it was when we were at SeaWorld, San Diego, you were doing the sign one.
Oh, right.
Climbing up.
And we're live. First of all, cheers, gentlemen. Let's have a little toast, relax. Bob, thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I understand that you've told the story many, many times. You've been grilled many, many times. It's very stressful for you, so I really, really appreciate your time. For people who don't know the story, there is a documentary. Jeremy Corbell has a documentary out right now. It's called Bob Lazar, Area 51 in UFOs
And flying saucers.
and flying saucers.
Bob's our Air 51 and flying saucers.
I first heard your story decades ago. I told you last night when we went out to dinner. I've seen pretty much every interview you've ever given. I've followed the story incredibly closely. But for people who don't know the story, let's give them the bullet points. You used to work at Area 51. Area 51. God, you went like what?
Well, we want to be accurate. Area S4.
S4.
It's about 15 miles south of Area 51.
Okay. You worked in how would you describe it?
I guess within the Area 51 compound, you can call that a subset of Area 51.
And you got that job. Before that, you were working.
Before that, I had worked at Los Alamos
Right.
National Labs.
And you were involved in what kind of work?
Nuclear weapon development, physics. I mean, they do everything there.
So how do they approach you to say, hey, Bob, why don't you come on out to the Nevada desert?
Well, the way this went down was, at that time, it was 1982, I put a jet engine in my Honda, and Los Alamos put it on the front page of the paper. Said, Los Alamos man, physicist at the lab, built this 200-mile-an-hour Honda jet car that I drove to work every day. So I was known in Los Alamos, the guy with the weird car, and you could hear it from a mile away. Anyway, the day that came out on the front page of the paper was the day Edward Teller, the father of the hydrogen bomb, was giving a lecture down there at the lab. And we didn't have much going on that day in our group, and I asked if I could go down there. And I went down there early, and Ed Teller was outside, leaning on a brick wall there and reading the front page of the paper. Now, this is a guy out of history, so I introduced myself. Hey, I'm the guy you're reading about there, and we talked for a little while, and it was cool. Fast forward to years later, I moved out to Las Vegas and had, left Los Alamos and, went on to other things, and I wanted to get back into the scientific community. I left to start other businesses and that sort of thing. So I sent resumes out, and one of them went out to Ed Teller and referenced our meeting, back in the day. And anyway, he remembered me and gave me a reference, somebody to contact at TGNG. And that's pretty much how it started.
So you get a phone call or a letter? What do you get?
Well, I got a letter initially, and went down for an interview probably a couple times, and it was down at EG&G Special Projects, which was at McCarran Airport at that time, out in Las Vegas.
And did they give you any sort of job description, what you were applying for?
They said it was for, I can't remember exactly what they did. This was a long time ago, but I think it was advanced propulsion or something like that, something relatively generic. And they said it's in a remote area. It's going to be some days on, some days off, and it was kind of not exactly a full-time job, but you might have to be out there for 2 weeks at a time and take 2 weeks off. And so it was kind of the work schedule would be kind of broken up.
And did this seem attractive to you, or did it seem weird?
No, it really wasn't weird, because people that work at the test site, anybody that's familiar with the area up there, working at the nuclear test site or at the Tonopah test range north of there, that's typically how things go.
So you had known about it from the scientific community? Because at Area 51 at that time was...
No, they didn't say anything about Area 51.
Okay, so
they just said it was in a remote location, and you just know it was up at the test site.
Right.
So, but there was no mention of Area 51 at that time.
So they've done hundreds of nuclear tests in Nevada, that whole area there's been just giant chunks of Nevada.
Yeah, there's a big piece of Nevada, and it's split up into different areas. There's a nuclear test site. There's Area 51. There's the Tonopah test range north of that. There's little sub areas. There's areas where they test chemical weapons and things like that. So it's all broken up as a gigantic test area.
So take me back to first day on the job. You accept the job. They take you out there.
Yeah, it's the first day. Really, I didn't really get to see a whole lot. The first day was essentially just paperwork. That's when I flew into Area 51 proper, and I left McCarran Airport and flew what they call the Janet flights, just a passenger plane from Las Vegas to Area 51, and it was really just going through a mountain of paperwork that day, from security clearances to it was like 2 or 3 hours of just solid paperwork, and that was really an uneventful first day.
When did things get weird? When did you realize? At what point in time did you say, "Hey, this is not normal work. Like, this doesn't even seem like it's from this planet"?
That I can't tell you what day that occurred on, because so much time has gone by. The days have kind of fused into one, and I can't separate the days.
Was it a slow burn, or was there a moment of recognition?
Well, the first inkling I had was when I came in. There's this facility that is at S4. It's in the side of a mountain, and normally we had pulled in with the bus and gone around the front through a normal double door. This time that I went in, there were hangar doors open. I went in through the hangar door, and in the hangar door was the disc, the flying saucer that I worked on. I saw it sitting there, and we walked by it, had a little American flag stuck on the side, and I thought, oh my God, this finally explains all the flying saucer stories. This is just an advanced fighter, and this is fucking hilarious. So I went by, I slid my hand alongside it, I got reprimanded immediately for touching the thing. And there was a guy, an armed guard, that followed us in and just said, keep your eyes forward and your hands at your side, and just walk through the door. So that was the first time I had seen anything that was weird. It was sometime later that I was introduced to my lab partner, Barry, and we had some of the subcomponents of the craft in the lab, and Barry was very anxious to get a new lab partner, so he was very talkative and couldn't wait to show me different things. And it was in the demonstration of the reactor working where it caught my attention to where this is technology that doesn't even exist. So, I mean, that was the first time I knew that this is really something.
What was it? What was it? What was it about this reactor that made you think that it didn't exist technologically?
Well, it was I actually have to back up, because there were some briefings that I read before that certainly gave me the impression that this was going to be a weird job, but this was the first hands-on thing. This was a small reactor about the size of a hemisphere, about the size of a basketball, on a metal plate, and when it was running, it produced a gravitational field of its own. Now, this is something that we can't do. We can't produce any gravity. The only way we get gravity is from large quantities of mass. But there's no machine we can have that turns on that makes gravity, like you can turn on an electromagnet and it makes a magnetic field. We can't make a gravitational field. Anyway, this device was producing that. And Barry said, almost like he was bragging, go ahead, try and touch the sphere. And I couldn't. It pushed my hands away, just like two light poles of a magnet. So that was...
so like when you take two magnets and try to press them together?
Yeah, you have that. Yeah, kind of good collision feeling, but you can't get them together. The closer you put them, the more they push.
When you felt that physically?
With my hand. Yeah, now there's nothing that does that. And that immediately caught my attention, going, wow, this is something else.
What was your thought? Like when you felt that and you knew that there was nothing that you were aware of that could produce
then that connected me to the briefings that I read on the first day at S4, was that, everything that I had read was apparently accurate.
What were you reading?
I read it was kind of an overview. This project was to back engineer the alien craft, and specifically it was to try and back engineer and see if we can duplicate the technology with available materials. Now, to do this, they split the project into many different pieces for several reasons. They do this on all classified projects, so nobody has the complete story, but they compartmentalize everything. And we had the power and propulsion system. So what the briefings they gave me were like a 1 or 2 page overview of some of the other projects that were going on in the craft. The only reason they do that is just in case what you're working on is connected intimately in some way that we don't know of to one of the other projects. You have to know their existence. So, again, everything from metallurgy to weapon potential of the craft. These were all essentially very short briefings, but mine was just power and propulsion, and it made it very clear that what I read was accurate.
So when you were reading that, before you actually saw the reactor, what were your thoughts on what they were describing? If you knew that something like that didn't exist, and they're describing it in the briefings, what did you think you were going to say?
I didn't know at the time. I mean, I was reading, I thought, is this some kind of test?
See if you're crazy.
Well, not to see if I'm crazy. A lot of times they'll take real high security jobs. I mean, they'll intentionally they would carry that information along and know where it came from. So I read through the documents, but I didn't know if this was part of some kind of test or what, or was it potentially realistic? I mean, I really didn't consider it being all that possible as far as being the actual thing that I was going to work on at the time.
How did they turn it on?
The reactor?
Yeah.
The reactor can be turned on or turned off in a lot of different ways. The way Barry showed me, the hemisphere is removed. There's a small tower in the middle. When you put the hemisphere on, the reactor activates. The reactor shuts down. It's load sensing. So if there's no load on the reactor at all, it shuts down. When there's a load present on it, it starts up again.
Load meaning?
You can consider it an electrical load. So, although it doesn't necessarily operate electrically, there's no wiring that connects any of the subcomponents together whatsoever. They just have to be in the immediate vicinity. The stuff is borderline magic, and that's essentially where we left it. When I left the project.
So there was no progress made.
There was some progress. I mean, we did identify, at least we think, some processes and had a rough idea, we think, of what was going on. But I think this is a problem that they've had for a long time. And, I was replacing somebody that Barry worked with prior to me. And I think there was some horrific accident that I didn't have a whole lot of information on, but, Barry alluded to that.
A horrific accident, like where someone died?
Yeah, where somebody died.
Because they were trying to tamper with things or figure out how something worked?
Yeah, the reactor in particular.
Yet he let you touch it.
Yeah, I think what they were trying to do was cut into one.
Okay.
Now they had more than one there, and it was supposedly there was an unannounced nuclear test, and that's what it was. At the time, remember, they were still doing underground nuclear tests at the test site. But from what I understand, according to Barry, there was an attempt made. Now, this must have been a pretty desperate attempt because it's not a very scientific process to analyze something that way. But it looked like they used a plasma cutter or something like that to cut into an operating reactor.
How many of these things did they have?
They had nine craft altogether. I only got hands-on with one of them, so I can't really say how the others operated.
Did you see the other ones?
Yeah. At one time, and only one time, the bay doors that between the hangars were all open, and I could see all the way through.
And Were they all exactly the same?
No, they were all different.
Different shapes?
Yeah.
But they were all from somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, did anyone make any attempt to explain or to tell you where they came from?
No one is the least bit interested in letting everybody know all the facts. They want to give you the minimum information that's necessary to complete your task. So you're not getting the story of where they came from. You're not getting the story of how much progress other people are making. You just focus on the small component.
But they gave you some indication that you think they acquired things.
I really couldn't say. I think they've been around for a while.
So they bring you into this room. You see this reactor working. You realize this is nothing that, as far as like the scientific community at the current time, what is your life like from that moment on? Is that where everything changes? Because I would imagine the moment you actually make contact with something that's extraterrestrial, whether it's an object or a being, something where you can actually absolutely be certain it's not from here, your whole paradigm, the whole world you live in, is now a different place.
Well, this is the only time it became exciting. The rest of the time it was really an ominous feeling being at work, but at that time it was exciting. I mean, and now I knew we were on the beyond the cutting edge of science, and I was so absolutely excited to be there every single time I was. This was a fantastic opportunity, and however, in short order, it began to concern me. We really have no idea what we're talking about, and the excitement kind of turned to dread at some point, because the amount of power we're dealing with is astronomical. I mean, to affect gravity, to produce the effects like this equipment does, takes huge amounts of power. And I've given the example before of taking a small portable nuclear reactor and putting it back into Victorian times, the scientists at the time, and just dropping it in a room. They come and look at it and see that it's producing power and wonder how it works, so they start taking it apart. And as soon as they get some of the shielding off, people are going to drop dead because of the radiation inside. Now, people have no idea that radiation even exists back then. But anybody that comes in to check on them will also drop dead. And, there is no reason that exact scenario couldn't happen with what we're dealing with. We have no idea how the physics operate within this thing. The power levels are, like I said, astronomical. It's incredibly dangerous to tinker with something like that. And, in some respects, we were guinea pigs, just trying to find out how to make this thing.
So they had a series, as far as your surmised, they had a series of different scientists try to back engineer this thing, try to figure out what this thing was, and they would bring in new people and like, let's throw a bomb at it.
Yeah. And I don't know how many, but I knew there was certainly one before me, and I knew he died during the analysis of the reactor itself.
And you don't know how many have worked on it, and no one gave
this could have been there for 50 years, it could have been there for 5 years.
But they're giving you the instructions. What are they saying? Like, when they're giving you directions, showing you all the stuff, what are they saying? What specifically, what are they asking?
Well, essentially what they ask is what I said. We are just to gather as much information as possible, find out how it operates, and see if we can duplicate it. So,
but they never told you where it was from. They never let you ask questions about where it's from.
Well, if the information I read in the briefings was accurate, now what I do have to say is the information that pertained directly to the reactor was accurate. What I read did jive with reality.
In terms of how?
In terms of how it was discovered. I'm sorry, the migraine is really making it hard for me to think here.
Sorry, no, we talked before the podcast. You tell everybody Bob's getting a migraine. I know you're very stressed out, which is one of the reasons why I appreciate you doing this.
where was I?
We're talking
Oh,
about
right. So there was some paperwork that indicated that this was from the Zeta Reticuli star system. Now, how they obtained that, I haven't the slightest idea. But it wasn't just from the Zeta Reticuli star system. It was what they called ZR3. So it was a third planet in that star system. So there was no other information about it other than that's supposedly where the crab came from. Now, is that true? I don't know. I have no way of verifying that. But that was printed in the same materials that referenced the reactor. Now, I looked that stuff up when I went home. And Zeta Reticuli is a binary star. Two stars that orbit one another, and it's only visible in the southern hemisphere, and it's about 30 some odd light years away. So that's literally all the information I have about that. I don't know how they found out it came from there.
You also probably have some suspicions that they give you some disinformation, like you were talking about before.
Yeah,
Too. And if you ever decided to talk about this, they had a bunch of nonsense to make whatever is factual look ridiculous.
right. Or be able to trace it down. Like, hey, this fax came out, and this bizarre guy said it came from Zeta Reticuli, so they knew who it was. Who it
We
made.
read Zeta Reticuli. We were like, what in the fuck is this?
Well, reading all of the stuff, it was, what the fuck is that?
You're like, why did I sign up for this? Like, what?
No, to me, this was cool. This was interesting. I said, I was just excited to be out in a secure area, in the middle of the desert. I said, this is awesome.
How old were you at the time?
I guess I was in my 20s.
Yeah, so probably totally geeked out.
Oh, yeah. This was great. I mean,
you see the actual starship with the little American flag sticker on it.
Well, that was...
Is that later or before?
That was before.
So before. So you see the thing before and you say, oh, this is
What's that before?
It's hard in so many years.
Yeah, I can't.
Either way, it doesn't matter.
The days have fused together. It's so hard to separate what happened in each visit.
Do you remember the thought process when you read that it's from Zeta Reticuli?
Yeah, it didn't hit me like a ton of bricks or anything. It was just like, yeah, okay. And
Think it's bullshit?
I don't know.
You just really
I don't. Now I don't. I mean, because when I read it, I hadn't verified anything, and this was just a bunch of stuff I was reading. And I thought maybe after this, they're just going to give me a test and see what I can remember and crazy information. But like I said, when I finally went in with Barry and had hands-on experience with what they were talking about, it took on a completely different meaning.
So there's a plate, there's this thing that looks like half a basketball, and when it's on, you can't come anywhere near it, you can't touch it.
Right.
How is it, what is gravity about that? Like the concept of gravity. Most people's gravity is bringing something towards you.
Right, well, I guess you would say it's anti-gravity. It's gravity shifted 180 degrees. It's anti-gravity.
And did they have any understanding about what could possibly create this effect? Did they have any areas where they'd like you to look into?
No, they knew there was a fuel source in it, and they were proficient at making it work. And again, my analogy to something like this is you can drop a motorcycle off in the wagon train days. Just leave it with the keys parked outside, somebody's place. Everybody will come around it and they'll poke and prod, and eventually they'll turn the key, get it to start, and become proficient at riding it.
Yeah.
But they won't be able to understand what the hell's going on. They won't be able to make a plastic fender, much less anything else. And I think that's exactly the state we were at. We played around with the parts long enough before I got there where they could make the reactor operate, take the fuel out, and know that it makes it work. How exactly what was going on in the reactor remained a mystery at the time. I think we made some progress on what was going on inside, but I don't think anybody really knew anything. They could just watch what was going on and make note of it.
How long were you there?
I'd say about 6 months or so.
What progress was made?
Well, we came up with a bunch of reasonably good ideas about how the reactor worked. And one of them was the base. The square base of it was essentially like a cyclotron, which is a small particle accelerator, a circular one. Particle accelerators, linear particle accelerators, are just a long tube essentially, and they accelerate particles with high voltage and radio frequencies till they reach high speeds. But a cyclotron does that. Very heavy element fuel, element 115, something that wasn't on our periodic charts at the time,
but it is now.
It is now, yeah.
When did it become on the periodic table? The charts now.
And I don't remember. Do you remember when they?
2004, Darmstadt, Germany, I think is where they first started. 4 atoms that lasted 220 milliseconds. Yeah, that's just nothing, right? And then later it was discovered a couple more times and fabricated. Then they gave it place then on the periodic chart. After that, called it muscle.
So they told you about this stuff in 1982.
Yeah, well, we kind of.
What year was this?
It was 88 and 89 when I was there. 82 is when
82 was in Los Alamos. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So 88, 89, they told you about this stuff. So this was not like.
No, they didn't tell me about it. That's one of the things that this group came up with. The God, I keep losing my train of thought with this thing.
So this one area, this element 115 was the fuel.
Yeah, it was the fuel.
The world will forgive you for having a mind.
It's really hard to think through it. Just give me a minute.
Give you more. I just want to say, yeah, definitely. That's just one thing. Bob, for the last 30 years, people have just been on the attack on Bob. Getting to know the personal effects on his life. It's really hard to understand unless you meet his family and his wife. I mean, this is the last thing he wanted to fucking do. Was have to talk.
Yeah, we should explain that, Jeremy. That you and I had this conversation. I watched your documentary. We had this conversation, and I said, I have to talk to him.
Yeah.
The document, there's been detractors. There's been a bunch of people that called bullshit on many of the things they've said, but over time, many of the things that you talked about, even in the 80s, have proven to be true. Things that people said were not true are proven to be true. Element 115 was one of them. Right?
Right. Element 115, the fuel they had, was stable. In other words, it didn't decay. It wasn't emitting radioactivity. When they synthesized the 2 or 3 atoms of the 115, it did decay, and it was not a stable element. So they're kind of two different things. But this is kind of typical. Elements always have, or pretty much always have, stable isotopes and unstable isotopes. Like I think cesium has like 30 unstable isotopes to it. So, hydrogen, for example, you're familiar with hydrogen gas. It's stable. It's not radioactive. But there's also 2 other types of hydrogen, deuterium and tritium. And deuterium isn't radioactive. It's another stable isotope of hydrogen, but tritium is radioactive. Now, they're all hydrogen, but they just have different amounts of neutrons. So it's the same thing with other elements and element 115. Depending on the amount of neutrons it has, designates the isotope, but it's 115. They will continue to take or experiment and try and make 115 at different isotopes, and I'm sure eventually they'll come up with a stable version, but it's the stable version that has the properties that we're talking about.
So they somehow or another had acquired a stable version. Did they say that the stable version had come with this craft?
Yeah, it absolutely came with the craft, yeah.
So at the time, you having a firm knowledge of the periodic chart and knowing what was real, what wasn't real, what was your reaction to having this stable element 115 that wasn't even supposed to exist?
Well, everything was impossible.
Right.
I mean, down to the metal. I did get a chance to look inside the craft on only one occasion, and this was important because where the reactor sat might have been critical to how it operated, since everything operates without any interconnection, so the placement of the components might be critical. So they allowed me to go inside and look at it. Again, I forgot where the hell I am.
So you're going into this craft, and what are you thinking when you're inside of it? What do you see?
It's it's a very ominous feeling because there are no, first of all, everything is one color. It's like a dark pewter color, and there are no right angles anywhere. It's as if somebody took, I've said this before, somebody took a model and fashioned it out of wax, and then heated it just for a short time so everything melted. Everything looks like it's fused together. Everything has a radius of curvature where two items meet. It's a really weird looking thing, but there was almost nothing other than a small foldable hatchway that looked recognizable. Everything was really unworldly, to pick a way to describe it.
So you get inside this thing, and it's designed for something that's much smaller than you.
Yeah, you can't really stand up till you get to the very center of it.
And how tall are you?
I'm 5'10".
And what do you think this was designed for?
I'd say something close to half.
So these little 3-foot tallish creatures.
Yeah, and then the seats were small too. I mean, obviously it was made, for something small, but there was no, there's nothing else in there. There's just seats, the reactor, and some of the subcomponents. There's no control panels. There's no bathroom. There's no decorative components or artwork or anything that you would recognize or trim. I mean, it's just a very, very bare bones thing.
You're not seeing any screens.
Well, there are archways around it that are part of the superstructure, and one of the archways can become transparent. When I was in there was another group working on one of the archways, and you could call that a screen, more or less.
So through that archway, it would maintain the solidity, the solid, whatever metal it was.
Yeah.
And you could
Yeah, it just became transparent. Yeah. I saw that happen once or twice before I left.
Did you ask any questions about what the fuck?
No, there's no asking.
There's no asking questions. But when you watch something become transparent, and you realize it's still there, you can now see through it.
Yeah, I mean, no, that's not that impressive. We do have some liquid crystal materials that are like that. And smart glass. Yeah, they call it smart glass. So this is just, and I don't know if the craft is made of, an advanced metal or a ceramic. It was cold to the touch, so I would lean more towards a metal.
You're not allowed to ask questions.
No, they work on the buddy system, so I can only exchange ideas and talk to Barry. Now this really interferes with science because science is based on free discussion. And ideally, you get a bunch of guys together, exchange ideas, work on problems, and that's how things move forward. But they're so over-the-top concerned about security, they split everything off, and everybody becomes stagnant. It just destroys any of the progress you can make, or at least makes it go so slow. I think they wind up shooting themselves in the foot.
Which is probably why they arrived at this bottleneck. They need to get this madman jet-powered Honda come in and see what he could do.
I think that was an act of desperation. I think they wanted someone that thinks out of the box and let's just give this guy a try here because they weren't. And they might have done this 4 more times since, up to the point in time today, assuming they're still working on this thing.
And when you see this craft and you're inside, was there any indication that there was an area that they would use to control it, to pilot? Was there a pilot seat?
There were 3 seats. They sat around, the reactor was in the dead center of it, and then equidistant around there were 3 seats.
So
and that's all. There was a large, they're not consoles, they're large rectangular objects, also spaced equidistant around the center. There's nothing on them, there's no buttons, there's no lights,
and they control the same color,
everything is the same color.
Just a different shape.
Right. And directly underneath them, there's 3 levels in the craft. The main level is what we're talking about, big rectangular objects. Underneath them are the gravity emitters that look like, for lack of a better word, a trash can hanging on a pipe. 3 of those. And then the top layer, this is just my personal belief, I think that has to do with a navigation or their version of a computer with some planar panels, sensor panels around the crabs that we would call portholes, but they're not portholes, they're just black areas. And I think that just determines its positionally was in the center section, and I stuck my torso in the bottom section and hung upside down so I could see how the gravity amplifiers were positioned.
What is the roughly the size of this thing?
It's I don't remember from being there, but after all this stuff was over, I had John Andrews, a guy from the Testers Model Corporation, and we sat down and tried to figure out from what I saw at known sizes of things, and we came up with 52 feet in diameter. So I think that's small. Yeah, so I think that's a reasonable guess.
Now you said there's 9 of them. You got a brief glimpse of the other ones. How are they different?
Oh, they looked completely different. One looked like I called it Jello mold, and it looked like a classic Jello mold with the rippled sides to it. One was a very flat disc, like like a straw hat or something like that. That was sitting up on its edge, and the thin part of it looked like a projectile had been fired through the edge of it. So I don't know if they were attempting to see if the metal could be penetrated, or if that's where the thing came from. Maybe it was shot down. But that was the only one where I saw there was, actual physical damage to it.
And that one was roughly the same size?
They were kind of too far away to tell.
And there were several teams that were working on the propulsion systems, so there was different teams that were working on these different aircrafts?
I don't know. I could only assume.
Now, when you're sitting in this thing and you're looking at this otherworldly craft, your goal is to try to figure out how this thing functions. Your goal is to try to figure out how this reactor. Imagine they would give you more time than just one day to check it out.
Oh, it wasn't one day.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Barry was there. I think Barry was sleeping there. I'm sure they had. That isn't weird. I mean, up at the Tonopah Test Range where they work on stealth fighters, you go, I think, 3 weeks on, 1 week off, and you stay up there too. So it's not weird to stay up at the test site.
Right.
So, I think he pretty much acted like he's been up there for a long time.
Yeah.
But
still there.
Yeah. Who knows?
Do you have contact with this guy?
No. Oh, I wish I did. I kind of thought he was going to come out after I did, and I think I took so much flack and so much shit for what went on. I think I wound up helping security there, and everybody became afraid of doing or saying anything after that.
So, what kind of reports did you have to give? So you're not making much progress, right? You're just trying to figure out what this thing is. It seems impossible.
Well, we didn't personally make them. I mean, we were always, there was never a lot of information that we gained. The guy, you would call him our supervisor, his name was Dennis Mariani, and kind of a military-looking guy, and he would routinely pop in, during the day, and, hey, what's going on, guys? And he would essentially relay any information, anything new we came up with. I mean, he was our go-between. When we presented him the information, then he took it to wherever they were, assembling all the data from everybody.
No, I assume you're working normal days, like an 8-hour day.
No, it was really weird that I would be only called in on certain times and certain days, and they would be weird hours too. Most of the time was later in the evening. I mean, I can get a call at 11 o'clock at night, and they'll say, it's now 11 o'clock. By 11:45, you need to be at the McCarran terminal, and we'll let you know when we have more information.
But what did you do while you were there? If you're looking at this object, this reactor, you can't figure out what it is or how it works, other than the fact that it works with this element that you don't even know about.
But sure, I mean, the thing was what you do with anything. If you're trying to analyze it, all you can do is perform tests. And all we did is try and come up with every kind of test we possibly could. I mean, we tested, it violated a lot of what we thought was impossible to violate. I mean, one of the first laws of thermodynamics, I mean, essentially, any machine, any device that operates always makes extra heat. Nothing works at 100% efficient. Even the headphones you're wearing, anything that takes power, some of that power is going to be converted to heat, and it's just wasted. This didn't. I mean, we looked at back then, we had infrared cameras. They're different today, but back then you had to pour liquid nitrogen into the camera to cool the sensor down and get these infrared images you've seen. But it never got, no matter what the load was on the reactor, it never got above the ambient temperature, which is impossible. I mean, you're pulling out huge amounts of power, and nothing ever gets warm. We tried measuring magnetic fields, and there was nothing there. So we started playing around with the emission from the emitters, the gravity wave itself, and saw what we could do with it and how it was focused. So we really spent all our time just trying to see what the stuff can do and what we can control.
So you were seeing what it could do, but you couldn't ever figure out how it was doing it.
No, not really. I mean, we really could only use or come up with a best guess. Now, I can't say we really that I could absolutely state with certainty how anything actually worked.
Now, how did you know at all how they were piloting it? Because they were doing some tests where they're having these things fly around in the sky. And this is what gets us deeper into your story.
Right. I was out there for one test. Right. In fact, I was with Mary in the lab, and Dennis came in and said, "We're about to run a test. Why don't you guys come out?" Or I think he said, "Mary, why don't you come out here and bring Bob with you?" We went out there, and the craft was already outside the hangar and was just preparing to lift off. Now, they were in communication with somebody in the craft.
So there's a person in the craft.
Yeah, there was certainly a person in there. Now, it's not a comfortable place to be in because it's small, so the guy has to be sitting on the floor in the middle, my best guess.
And this is the same specific craft that you worked on, because that was the only craft that you were in.
The only one that I touched and worked on. And it quietly lifted off the ground, which was incredibly impressive to see.
Quietly or silently?
Well, quietly, because it produced a little corona discharge from the bottom. And corona discharge is kind of a high voltage brush, little bluish glow discharge. As it was lifting off the ground, you could hear a slight hiss sound. Now, as soon as it cleared the ground by about 5 or 10 feet, maybe even less than that, the hissing stopped and the blue glow disappeared. So it lifted off quietly, and then it hovered silently, if you want to be specific.
Wow. So then what kind of maneuvers was it doing?
It took off, for that particular time, it took off, moved a little around to the left and right, and then sat back down. The craft itself, they communicated with it with a ring, because I saw the guy talking in a regular VHF radio to the person in the craft. And I even saw the frequency that was on the frequency counter of the communication, the transceiver there. But what's weird is he shouldn't be able to communicate with the craft with a radio. The radio wave should bend around the craft. I mean, it shouldn't be possible. Every single thing about the craft and the way they operate it didn't make any sense to us. I mean, that's something we talked about for a while after.
Why should the frequency bend around the craft?
Well, you really have to look at the way the gravity wave comes out of the craft. There's the reactor's in the center, and there's a waveguide that goes up to the top. There's actually a small appendage that sticks out at the top of the craft, and it produces a heart-shaped gravitational distortion around the craft. Now, if the craft is sitting in the air, and you walk underneath it and look up, you actually cannot see the craft. The light bends around it. You're bending, gravity bends light. It bends radio waves. It's it shouldn't be possible to communicate with a craft that has an envelope around it that's distorting all forms of energy. But they were apparently in contact with it.
Somehow or another, through some unexplained way. It didn't
Yeah.
bother explaining to you. So this thing gets up, it just does some very simple maneuvers, left, right, goes down. And did they discuss this with you? I mean, they said they wanted you to see it.
No, they just wanted, no, they didn't discuss anything with me. It sat down, we looked around for a bit, and Barry said, let's go back. We went back in the lab. All we got to do was see it. Yeah, fast forward to some months later, I did have the test flight schedule of the craft. Now, they had times they had designated high-performance tests. This obviously wasn't one that was a high-performance test. The high-performance test goes above the mountain range, and they do much more radical moves with the thing. Look, this is a prize item, and they're not doing anything like taking it out of the atmosphere or flying around to other countries or anything like that. They just play with this thing right over the test site. But they were doing some radical moves with it. And since I had the test flight schedule, statistically, the amount of traffic in the surrounding areas on the highway was lowest on Wednesdays. And that's why Dennis told us that all the test flights occurred only on Wednesdays, because it'd be the least chance that anyone would see what's going on.
And this was before the government had expanded the forbidden territory around Area 51, the Papoose Lake, and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, I think that occurred after my story came out. Then people started going up on the mountaintops and trying to look down into there, and they kind of freaked out and then did the land grab and pushed everybody back. But yeah, I think all that occurred long after that I came out.
So you're working there, and while you're working there, you run into this crazy schedule. Forgive me for explaining your story, but you would get these phone calls. You would have to go to the airport at 11 p.m., and your wife started thinking that you were having an affair.
Yeah, apparently so. Now, I did get my permission to have, as part of the, security clearance process, I gave written permission to have the phones monitored and things of that sort, so they weren't doing any covert stuff. They, with any Q clearance, which is civilian top secret clearance or military top secret clearance, they go talk to friends and, places you've been, make sure you're not connected to foreign countries, but, monitoring your phone is nothing unusual. However, they insisted that, you don't even talk to your loved one, to your partner, to your wife, whatever, about what's going on. So she was essentially in the dark and didn't know the phone was being monitored. Well, part of the security clearance is that not only do you not have any connections to foreign countries and aren't a maniac, but you have to have a stable home life too. Well, she started having an affair with a flight instructor. Now, they were monitoring this on the phone, and they knew it, and I didn't. So they stopped me coming in, and their attitude at the time was, we need to see how this is going to play out, and if Lazar is going to get a little weird or anything. So let's just, hold him off from coming in and, see what happens.
And they explained this to you, what was happening?
Well, after the fact, yeah, because time kind of went on, and there were guys that were following me around, and I started getting a little concerned, going, well, shit, are they booting me out of the project? And if so, they're not just going to let me hang out at home and go get a new job knowing what I know. So as time went on, I started getting a little concerned, and I took my closest friends and just kind of got together and I said, hey, remember that job I told you about? This is what's going on. And you don't need to take my word for it. On Wednesday night, we need to all go out here. I want to show you what's going on. So I took everybody and we went out to, remember, since I had the test flight schedule, and went outside the base, out into the desert, and so everybody could see, one of the high performance tests. And, you know, it left quite an imprint on everybody, so they knew I wasn't.
This videos of these tests, right?
Yeah, but remember, this is it's in the dark in the 80s with a big monster-sized camcorder, and you got, you know, jumping around. But, yeah, I mean, we did video of it, but there's no, by today's standards,
But is your video specifically available? The video that you took?
Yeah, well, George Knapp has it.
Is it online?
I have no idea.
Sure.
Yeah, I showed clips of it in my film. It's online, and someone did a deep analysis of it. It was interesting. Just take a look at how.
Hold this microphone up to this. About a fist room.
You know, to see how his video looks now. But as far as video evidence, I mean, we are talking 80s campers. The most important thing is the human story here. Everybody that he took up there on 3 separate occasions, they don't all like each other. They don't all talk. They all agree on one thing. They saw something that night at the exact point in time and space that Bob Lazar said. And remember, this is 17 miles south of Area 51. No one even knew really about Area 51. We're talking Papoose Lake, and they all agreed. They saw something that night they had never seen before, and they've never seen since, right when he said it. So that's one of like the 6 things where I'm like, how did he know? You could dismiss him. I tried to dismiss him. But some things we can't get around, and there's about 5 or 6 of them. How did he know about this?
If Jamie wants to find that video right now, what would he look at?
Bob Lazar, UFO, S4, Area 51, just kind of like that. So it's like this S4 UFO video, Bob Lazar. The guy does an analysis, but you're analyzing these 80s videos.
Right.
He, from the very beginning, Bob never said, I have proof of my story and I'm going to tell the world. He said at the very beginning, I cannot prove my story. That's not why I'm telling this. George Knapp convinced him to tell people, and he lived through it. And I didn't believe it either until I talked with George.
Okay, so you film this test flight, one test flight, and then you get caught.
Actually, it was, I think, the 3rd time, because we went out there the first time. Everybody saw it. Everybody was amazed because it did some radical maneuvers, and you know, everybody had a lot to say about it.
The maneuvers that I've seen the video. It doesn't. I don't think there's something we have now that does that.
No,
in terms of like a human piloted craft. I mean, I don't know, obviously, with the government.
no, it's impossible. Nothing can move like that. And remember, we didn't start filming from the very beginning. You know, we were waiting for something, you know, to happen. The craft took off, and it came flying at us, stopped, you know, turned at a right angle, flew back, and then, you know, after it did some, you know, amazing stuff to get the camera, and then we started filming. So it doesn't have all of it on there; it just has some.
The way I described it to my friends, and I said, "What is?" I said, "Take a laser pointer, and then have a wall, and then move it around the wall. You know how it moves around the wall? It doesn't seem like it has anything to do with inertia or physics, or it's not impeded in any way by the atmosphere."
Yeah,
that's what it looks like.
You're essentially separated from reality. As crazy as that sounds, with being in case it's an own gravitational envelope, inertia is not going to affect it. And you know, this is how some of those recent sightings with Commander David Fravor. I'm sure you've heard of this exact UFO. I mean, he describes exactly that the thing operates exactly the way we saw this, and you know, on the way home, it's like, hey, we got away with it. We should try it again the next test flight day. So this became a thing to do, and I think it was on the 3rd time that we got caught. I mean, we started becoming a little careless. I think we took a motorhome out there, and you know, I mean, it was like the stupidest thing you could possibly imagine.
Tailgating.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. And
again, you're in your 20s.
Yeah, and you know what was funny was we went out there, and my friend Gene Huffin and I were leaning on the front of the vehicle, and just for some reason we just started talking shit. Like, well, I hope they realize that I don't remember what we were saying, but you know, that it's something about attacking the base or something along those lines and stealing the craft or something like that. So correct. And then about 20 feet in front of us, we see a little green light fall on the ground and roll to us. And unbeknownst to us, now it's pitch black, you can't see your hand in front of your face. There were a bunch of guards standing right out there, and they had a night vision scope where they were like from here to the wall, looking at us, listening to us, and the guy dropped it, and the scope rolled over to us, and you could see the green screen. You know, we turned the lights on, and all these guys were there. So it was,
Whoa.
yeah. So we did incredibly stupid stuff and got caught as we should have.
So when they catch you and they bring you in, then what happens?
Well, I went in for debriefing. The following day, I went to Indian Springs Air Force Base, which is kind of a defunct base that they used to use at the nuclear test site. And this is when they brought out the transcript of the phone call with my wife. And, you know, they sat me down and we said, you know, when we meant to keep the secret, we meant you can't tell your friends, right? You know, and it just being sarcastic and trying to. And then they got real serious. But this is where they, you know, took the transcript out and were reading me what my wife and, you know, our friend were talking about. And it was a hard time.
So what happens from there? What do they do? Why don't they arrest you?
I don't know. I don't know why. I'm not sure they knew what to do, but they did let me go that night, and I went home. And this is kind of when the most stressful part started.
Because you're realizing you're being monitored.
Yeah, now I know. Not only am I being monitored, but now I know I'm in trouble. And it wasn't a short time after that I contacted, you know, at that time the only investigative reporter I had heard of in Las Vegas was George Knapp, and you know, told him some of the story because I had no idea what the hell was going to happen at that point.
So George Knapp tries to dissect your story, tries to find holes in it, tells it, puts it online, and makes everybody aware of it. That's how I found it.
Yeah, to make a long story short.
What happens? Yeah, what happens from there on? I mean, do they contact you and say, "Hey, Bob, it's probably a good idea if you shut up"? Did they try to label you as crazy? Was there?
There were a lot of things that happened, that, you know, between that point. I'm leaving out a lot of stuff to fill in the story. We'd have to go back to Los Alamos and well, I really don't want to talk about that. The
Top secret weapons stuff that you're.
no, I'm talking about the 115. Well, I don't know. I have to think about how
What is the problem?
I don't want to get myself into more trouble by admitting something, so I just have to dance around a couple.
He was great just during filming of the movie.
Yeah, the movie's great, by the way.
Thanks, John.
And it's on Netflix right now if anybody wants to check it out. And if you're one of those people like me who, you know, I've always loved the idea of UFOs. I became extremely weary talking to people who are UFO believers and UFO fanatics because there's so many of them full of shit. And not just full of shit, they're childishly delirious. Like the way they talk about things. I mean, there's so many people that I'm in contact. They reach me in the night and they explain.
The reasons I didn't want to do the show. Well, no, it's no. Yeah, well, it's no joke. We've had people literally camp out on our front lawn, and you know, in some ways I can relate to some of these people. You know, maybe some of them did really have some kind of experience or saw something, and all their friends think they're crazy. But hey, now there's this guy I heard on the radio, and at least he knows I'm not full of shit, so I gotta talk to him. And so most of the correspondence I get are people trying to get a hold of me, going, "Bob, you gotta listen to me. I'm coming to talk to you. I'm driving from Oklahoma or whatever." And but some of them are just fucking bad shit crazy.
Yeah.
They're frightening.
There's a lot of schizophrenics that are involved in the conspiracy. There's a lot of people with real issues.
Joe, it would be a disservice to your audience to not say that we have to look at what's going on now and understand. I've heard on your show a bunch of stuff about what's going on now, and to not really understand what's going on now, you can't see Bob's story in the correct light after 30 years. And at some point, we should just touch upon that The biggest being that things like the Tic Tac UFO case that came out, I've heard people, even on the show, say, oh, there's a glitch in the radar. That's a data poor perspective. You just don't know yet what's really going on. Commander Frank Neighbor, I was able to get the interview with him to talk to him way before it became public. I got that from him. He saw it. Other pilots saw it. This is a big thing that's going on right now. They have more sightings on the East Coast recently. Cubes with spherical orbs. These are not aerodynamic, and these are the people we trust to defend us on 9/11. Commander Frank protected Los Angeles on 9/11. So we trust them, but they're not trained observers. Radar, individuals see these things, and the big one, just to throw down so we can consider a story a little differently, there's more depth to it. The big one is the United States government has admitted that they have been continuously studying the UFO phenomenon. That program was called ATIP, Advanced Aerospace, was called OSAP. That's the mother program. George Knapp got that out. They announced to the New York Times about ATIP, but OSAP, these acronyms, OSAP, Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Applications Program, who cares? That was the mother program. So they've admitted we didn't stop studying UFOs in 1969, Project Blue Book. We don't think it's crazy. We actually want to reverse engineer the technology. That's why on your other show, you said, what's this AAV thing? It's like they're making up another UFO name. Well, hold on, there's a reason. Because in the documents, the DIA documents that George Knapp released, that everybody said was fake until now they know is real, they call them AAVs, which is Advanced Aerospace Vehicles. People are getting the acronyms wrong. So the reason for the terminology change is so that we can mimic what we're reading in the DIA documents. People can look for that now. So they changed the names to get people away from UFO or UAP, even like Hillary Clinton said on air, right? So what are you talking about? Hillary Clinton informed the public on Jimmy Kimmel, oh, Jimmy, we don't call them UFOs anymore. We call them UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, right? So she kind of was getting, the Clintons are very into the UFO topic. Senator Reid, he's done a lot for the subject, the study of it, right? So she informed the public so they could look for the right term. So these terms are important because the DIA in those documents, they've been calling them AAVs for quite some time now.
And they changed the name to anomalous.
No, that's kind of a misnomer.
No?
So they always mess around with things, but it's actually advanced.
Right. They're describing it in the news. They were calling it anomalous aerospace vehicle.
Totally. And that's cool. They were also saying anomalous aerospace threats, AAT, right? Because they want the sense of a threat.
Right.
So my point is, all of it, if people don't know this now and they think this stuff is fantasy, this part of it, that we're studying it, that we take it seriously, we're spending money on it, and that we're getting great data from visual pilots to radar. That's why, it's aerospace. They dropped it from 80,000 feet. But guess what? That's the top scope of the Spy 1 radar is 80,000 feet. So the radar system they were using, it was coming from above that. So my point is this. If you don't understand that this is happening, you're just behind the curve because you don't have the information. Because of the stigma that you're talking about, I saw you get totally upset with UFO talking. I met you first when you were totally upset with UFO talking. It's the people. When you're doing your, I'm sorry, man. When you're doing your show, the Joe questions everything. I can see how frustrating it is. Trust me, I have been frustrated to hell. Luckily, my mentor is George Knapp, and he's taught me the pitfalls as I went through it. The whole point in this rant right here is just that we have to now look at Bob's story, but knowing the facts, not someone saying it's a bird, it's a plane, it's a glitch. They're not. And so if you don't know that, you just don't have the information yet.
Not just that, knowing the facts as we know in 2019, not 19.
Absolutely. And so what has he said that has come true? He's totally unimpressed with it, right? What has he said that's come true? So I was like, Bob, they've announced gravity is a wave. You were right, and you're vindicated. And he looks at me and he's like, but think about it, Jeremy. I had like a 50-50 chance. He was not very impressed, right?
But did they announce gravity as a wave?
So they detected, in a sense, gravity waves. And that's
Who's they?
You might know more. There's two black holes that were colliding, and that's how they were able to detect.
Yeah, somebody, Bill, I don't know which group it was and what part of the government.
That's what Google's for.
Yeah, but they, built a gigantic gravity wave detector and pretty much detected.
there's such things as gravity.
First observation of gravitational waves, it says it was in 2016. Okay, the first observation of gravitational waves was made on 14th of September 2015. As announced by the LIGO and Virgo collaborators on 11th of February 2016. Previously, gravitational waves had only been inferred indirectly via their effect on the timing of pulsars in binary star systems. Dum, dum, dum. The waveform connected by both LIGO observatories matched the predictions of general relativity for a gravitational wave emanating from the inward spiral and merger of a pair of black holes around 36 and 29 solar masses and the subsequent ring down of the single resulting black hole.
Well,
Yes, he was like,
in the 80s, the predominant theory was gravity is produced by gravitons. Part of theoretical particles, but they're waves. They're not particles. And
So the thought is that the way we experience gravity, it's based on mass, which is why the moon, which is roughly 1/4 the size of the Earth, has 1/6 of the Earth's gravity. So there's some sort of a computation you can make based on mass.
right. And remember, we can observe the effects of gravity, but we have no idea what it is. All we can do is observe it, and we can't make. The only way you can make gravity is just put more mass together, and it's just a product of gravity. But if you have a machine that makes gravity, you could pretty much do anything. You can affect time. You can have force fields. All of that stuff that's in science fiction becomes reality if you have a machine that can make gravity. And what we worked on in the desert was a machine that makes gravity.
I love your analogy of dropping off a small nuclear reactor to the Victoria. I love that analogy because back then that wasn't possible. That was magic. What you're talking about here, the fact that they just discovered this 4 years ago, this is wave. And we're, as much as we know and as impressed as we are, as we should be, with how much more technologically advanced we are than every other creature on this planet, we're still in many ways in the adolescence of technological innovation.
Absolutely. If even adolescence.
And when you're talking about this binary star system, Zeta Reticuli, and who knows how much longer these things have been around than us, who knows what their evolutionary cycle's been, who knows what, we might be talking about something that's a million years more advanced than us.
Yeah, it could easily be. Now, believe it or not, I'm not into UFOs. I don't follow stories or,
Even after your experiences?
No, I'm fascinated with the technology, and it irks me like every night I go to sleep that, that it was my own doing, essentially, that prevented me from continuing on in the project. I mean, it's that to be on the cutting edge of technology is so boring to me.
Right.
But, by the same token, I don't really care that there's aliens or where they come from. I mean, the prize is the technology, and that's what I'm fascinated by. But so I don't listen to UFO stories and that sort of thing. But George Knapp is, he's the guy that has the contacts and tries to thread everything together. And what he recently told me is he found, I don't know, it was either documentation or people that he spoke to. It's the existence of this project, the project that I was on. It's something that they seem to take out every 8 or 10 years.
So that's a very specific memo, and this is actually, this is the first time I'll be very clear with people about it. It's a big topic of conversation right now. It's called the Wilson Memo. You can look it up. Admiral Wilson met with a scientist who's actually was featured in one of my films. Everybody has been debating whether or not this document of a conversation with a sitting admiral at the time is a real document. It's an actual conversation that happened, and this document is real. Everybody wants to know. The world's going crazy right now in the UFO world. I'll tell you straight up right now, I'm in the position to know, and it is a real document, that it is real. So the conversation, when you read that conversation was had. I can't attest to everything.
You're not being very clear.
Sure.
Please.
No problem. So there was a document that is circulating right now that is really big. It's going around everywhere. People are asking, what is this document? It's called the Wilson Memo. Is how you can find it online. Or the Wilson Leak.
The Wilson Memorandum. You said few involved.
No, that's not it. Yeah. So Admiral Wilson meets with this scientist, and they have this discussion. Oddly enough, at special projects at EG&G, and if I remember, the documents from 2001. I'm telling everybody right now, it's real, and we'll see. My history's pretty good, like saying if something's real or not, right? So here we go. The document comes out. They meet at EG&G special projects. In 1989, they stumble into a problem. This happens. They put the technology away, and then they bring it back out and see if material science has caught up and if they can make any progress. So this document kind of talks about this process. The big thing I get from it, and a lot of it's vindicating to Bob, and one of the things that's vindicating, besides the EG&G thing, is that private industry, so this guy's an admiral, and he says, I found out about your SAP, your Special Access Program. I need to know about it. And he's going to a private part of industry, and he is denied access. And he says, I should be running this program. And they were able to deny him access. So I think the takeaway here is, check it out. I'm telling you that is an actual correct, that is a leak. Now, everything said in that document, I don't know.
What are you talking about? What is said in that document?
It's between a scientist and an admiral that are sitting, and they're having a meeting, and they're talking about the search for the UFO subject, the search to get special access program access to all of these different things, like reverse engineering programs. So in this document, they talk about it. I believe that this document, the person that went was employed by Robert Bigelow, one of the guys that has a couple of orbits, satellites, and all that stuff.
He's the guy who owns Skinwalker Ranch.
No, he's not. He was the guy that owns
Used to own it.
Okay. Yeah, he used to own it. There's a new owner, and I interviewed him for my other film, but there's a new owner, and you'll be hearing a lot more about that soon. But there's stuff that you'll be hearing about Skinwalker Ranch because there's a new owner. Anyway, the whole point of this, insertion here is just that document kind of validates a lot of this idea Bob just said, that they make a little progress, then they can't go anywhere, they tuck it away, and then they bring it back out, 10 years later and start working on it. What is the limiting factor? I think Bob should speak on this, but it's the material science.
Yeah, it's really where physics is. So I can see them doing that. I mean, I didn't have any information on that, but I think what George uncovered is probably accurate. That we try and do what we can, and once we reach a roadblock on, we really can't figure it out. It's just bring it away, put the thing away, and say, all right, now where can we go? But
There's got to be someone who remains informed, right?
oh yeah,
So you've got your scientists like you and Barry. You got your people that you compartmentalize. You got these people working on
yeah,
this
there
project.
has to be some people
Right.
that know everything.
You've got security, and then someone's going to be on the outside saying, hey, we need people to guard this building. Don't let anybody in.
I think a lot of that is private industry, and I think that's how they keep it. Yeah, I think that's how they litter, because the government is just so leaky. I think that's kind of what they're doing.
That's what the document kind of proves. You just articulated that it is in control of private industry.
What private industry? Some aerospace company? Something?
I don't know.
Yeah, they would. The guy with the admiral wouldn't name it in the conversation. Yeah.
So they still have these things, supposedly.
I would guess. I mean, I don't have any information on
Have
that.
you ever asked anyone that has any inkling of any idea of where they got them or how they got them?
No, but something must have been said to me from Barry. But it was just too long ago, and I can't quite remember what was said, but it just left a seed in my mind. I think at least one of them was part of an archaeological dig. So it's old. At least one of them is old. I don't know if it was the one I worked on, but I remember something to do with an archaeological dig. So that means it's not just old, it's ancient.
Great skills.
Yeah,
Right?
that's all of it would.
Yeah,
That tripped me out when he said that the first time.
Yeah, that's a freak over there. Just a couple of dudes with some brushes looking for Tyrannosaurus Rex bone and hit metal.
And when did they find it? You know, they have 9 of them.
Well, and how could we have not heard about that? What about the guys with the brushes? How could you uncover something like that? And
Well, Joe's newspaper at home does. I mean, they said it on that first day.
Oh, you mean the Roswell?
Yeah,
paper?
yeah.
I have a cover. What is this here, James?
This is the document, but I had to do some digging to find it.
Yeah, it's just kind of, so this is where they meet at EGG. This is Admiral Wilson, and there's a lot more coming out. Now, I want to be clear, George didn't put this out. He didn't leak this out to me. This is, I can tell you how I
recorded this conversation.
So this was an employee of, at the time, Robert Bigelow.
And this is in 2002.
Right. Do you remember when he had that government contract called OSAP the world all knows about now? And he had NIDS that studied the ranch. That $22 million, everybody is saying it was for ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. The $22 million was for OSAP that was pushed through Congress, 3 congressmen, right? An astronaut. It was pushed through. And that's what that $22 million, by the way, they spend more money on Viagra every year than they do studying UFOs. If it was just this program, which I think is funny.
They probably make a lot more money from Viagra.
They probably do.
Than UFOs.
Well, you never know how it seeds into the population. But anyway, this program, this is what was the mother program. So it got the $22 million, and really it was to study Skinwalker Ranch. Oddly enough, that $22 million all was inspired by the phenomenon they were seeing at Skinwalker Ranch, because the scientists, they're seeing vehicles coming through like a space in the sky.
Yeah, we went there.
Right. Yeah.
Interviewed a bunch of people that seem full of shit, but a couple that are very, very interesting.
Totally. And if you look, I spent a lot of time in the area. I'm not talking about those stories. I'm saying there were scientists hired by the government, right, through Bigelow to study the ranch because they thought it was important. And, whatever. The point is that $22 million was to study that. Then we have ATIP, which is like an auxiliary kind of program of military science, like Commander Fravors and that sort of thing. This document is just one of those things that has now come forward that through the Bigelow studies, it was government funded, and then it was personally funded and then government funded. It's just one of those things that kind of shakes you, because you got this military guy who can't get access because of the private industry that's holding these non-terrestrial materials, that they can't study it. So that's the claim right now. Give it some time, let people dig more into this. It's fascinating, man.
So you are essentially you're kicked out, right? You're out of this program. You can't work with these crafts anymore. And do they give you any threats? Do they tell you what you have to do from here on out?
yeah, well, I mean, the way it ended was I told George Knapp all this stuff, and he said, well, let's just get it on tape. Should something happen, at least we have a record of it. And I don't remember what the name was, but at some point George wanted to air it, and he said, you make the call on it, and look, if at any point you change your mind, we won't air it. And it came down to the day where George wants to put it on the 5 o'clock news. He said, hey, this is important stuff. People have to know about it. And I thought it was too. I thought it's kind of a crime. I know you got to keep the technology secret, but you can't not tell everybody that this stuff is going on, that we have, actual hardware from another civilization. It's a big fucking deal. Probably the biggest one there ever was. And George, when it came right down to the time to air it, I changed my mind and I said, we're not doing it. And that's what turned into the famous wrestling match between me and George trying to get the tape, but he won because he was a bigger guy.
So you actually physically wrestled?
Well, I think it was more of a pulling match. I don't think we ever hit the ground, but he got the tape, put it in the player, and boom, 5 o'clock news was on. And then I got a call after that, and they said, it was from Dennis. He said, you have any idea what we're going to do to you now? And he hung up the phone. That was the last communication I had with him.
And what has happened to you since then?
After that, a lot of people I've known either were audited by the IRS, anybody I know that had clearances that worked in secure programs, had the clearances of mine that Jeremy knows.
He's going on camera with me soon. He'll tell the story now that he's out of work up there?
He was working up at the Tonopah test range, waiting for his clearance to come through, and they pulled that. It became, it's like if they can't get the person that's involved, they just create a problem for everybody that surrounds them. And so, I mean, the way it turns out, it hurt a lot of people's lives that I was connected to. And that's an effective way of shutting someone up. So
Did you feel that by coming forward and going public, they couldn't just snuff you out?
That's what I was told, and George and everybody, said that it's public. There's, no one will touch you, and I fell for it. And I
Do you
just
wish you didn't?
Yeah, sometimes.
Sometimes when it's just overstressed and people camping on your lawn.
Yeah, but this is gonna make things worse. Doing this.
No, it's not make things better.
That's what I was trying to tell him.
How is this gonna make things better?
Because you're getting a real chance to explain yourself in a way that's going to make people who are not only work in the government, people that are police officers, and firefighters, and first responders, and doctors and scientists, they're going to empathize and empathize with what it must be like to be a person like you in your 20s who gets thrust into this world unknowingly and confronted with one of the most, if not the most important discovery in the history of human beings. The big question, are we alone? It's the number one question. There's two questions, right? What happens when we die, and are we alone? Those are the two big questions.
Right.
And if we're not alone, and someone knows we're not alone, and these some people who know we're not alone are these bungling sort of...
Even if they weren't, it's a crime.
Yes.
They're not telling the rest of us.
I mean, I don't mean bungling in terms of they're incompetent. I mean, you can't be competent. It seems to me, the way you're describing that no one can be competent with this technology. Like the Victorian era scholars analyzing some sort of a nuclear reactor. There's no way.
Why do you think they're not telling us? Let's just make an assumption that this is true right now. Why do you think they're not telling us? Our government doesn't tell us. What's your best?
Let me put it into what you do. If I'm the president, okay, and I get this information, what do I do with this? What do I do with this? There's something that we don't know. There's something we don't understand. There's something that came from another world. We got it tucked away in the mountains. And I just want you guys to know about it. Hey, sleep tight. Hey, American Idol's on tonight. Who do you think's going to win?
Yeah.
Who's going to win American
Idol? So one is uncertainty, and the other one is what Bob and I have talked about a lot. Absolutely not knowing what to tell people because you don't really understand it yourself. Even
right. What do you say? If you want to run a government, you want to get people to pay their taxes.
There's something else.
Yeah. What do you say?
So you have these objects flying with impunity, right? And you have something else.
Well, what can you say? Like, how much do you really know?
I think it's mainly the technology. They just want to keep the technology secret because if there's,
whoever gets this,
you control the where you literally become invincible once you master the technology. You cannot penetrate a field like that. So imagine I know it's all science fiction, but science fiction turns into science fact. If you have real force fields around aircraft and battleships, you win. You win. You can force your will upon anybody. And like I said, there's so much more to the story. When I was first there were Russian scientists at S4. This was early on in the project.
So this was before Operation Paperclip became public as well, right?
I would imagine. I don't know what the dates were.
When was that?
When did was
98, I think. Yeah, I don't know the dates on it.
So it's roughly 10 years later, Operation Paperclip becomes Freedom of Information Act.
You're talking about Russian, not German. You're talking Russian scientists.
Yeah, but I mean, Russian scientists, a lot of them came from Germany. A lot of those rocket scientists that worked with NASA, they all came from Nazi scientists.
Got it.
So some Russians got some of them.
I just know at some point there was intense cooperation. Even exchanging some ideas on nuclear weapons and EMP tests and stuff, things we would never have discussed with them. But at the same time, it was in the late 80s. They were involved and actually in the area at S4 with us.
And got to meet. They these guys, or you saw them?
No, I knew they were there. Barry would talk about the commies that were there.
Commies.
Yeah, the commies. And
That was back when they were the commies.
yeah, they were real commies. At some point, it wasn't our group, but at some point, there was a big discovery made. And this did not happen when I was there. It happened in between my trips to there. And after that, apparently they decided it was just too cool to share with anybody, and the Russians were never allowed back on the base after that.
But you don't know what their discovery was.
No, I guess it wasn't my group. So one of the other groups really found out something. But Bash goes, all right, this is ours. You guys get the hell out of here.
Was there any inkling that any other government had something similar?
No, nothing that I had heard.
See, that was the thing that always freaked me out, was why, if something was so superior to human beings, it's almost like visiting an ant colony. Like, why would you go to the queen? I don't give a fuck who the queen is. I'm a human. I'm so superior to you ants. I don't care who you have running your hive. I'm just going to study it.
I think it's who got it.
Who got it?
Look at the, rocket technology in Germany.
But they got 9 of them?
Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me either. So they were either in the same area, or one had clues to where others were. I mean, I don't know. You have to fill that in there, but you're right. I mean, 9 of them.
Recent sightings, these discussions that have been coming out recently from Air Force pilots and Navy pilots, they've been talking about things happening in the ocean. When that something
Go New York Times, I know this one really well, with Commander Fravor and those pilots. There was a disturbance on the surface of the water. Commander Fravor visually saw what looked like similar to a cross, some object. So it's like as if you have some coral under the water and it's breaking over. The Tic Tac is doing this crazy maneuver that defies. It's a gravity-propelled system.
they saw it in the sky before they saw it in the water, right?
Yeah, so there were radar that was picking these things coming down from 80,000 feet, dropping to 50 feet in less than a second.
This is it, Jamie? What is it?
This is actually on the news today. There was a briefing.
So a lot of people get this confused.
Up to not this one then either.
No, so that is Pentagon that are all actually. I would really just pay attention to the source video. So you've got the Tic Tac, which is this object that Commander Fravor saw. Another pilot filmed it with a FLIR pod, and it goes. But this one you see is really important to Bob's story. The gimbal craft. It's been recently analyzed. It's FLIR. Not only does it's definitive that it's not conventional anything by its movements, but there's a pocket of cold air around a propulsion source. So this object, by the way, sat stationary for days, if not weeks. It sat stationary.
Yeah, they found it 11 hours later. They were saying there's no way this thing, using that kind of energy to go that fast, could just hover
the amount of times. And by the way, you're seeing a very small part of what happened that day. This object was not alone. And so hopefully that information comes out and we can, I wish we had video of it. I'm sure we all want to see it. But that's called the gimbal. That was East Coast, right? 2015. West Coast, 2004 is the Tic Tac. The disturbance on the water, Commander Fravor believes there was something under that water that was causing that disturbance when the Tic Tac was coming around and doing it. With inside the people that are studying this, they're thinking maybe the Tic Tac system was causing the disturbance, but the USO, unidentified submerged object that he visually saw. The whole interesting thing about that is, I would love Bob to describe it, is why it doesn't matter if these craft are in space, air, or water. Why doesn't it matter? I love when he talks about this shit.
Well, first of all, Commander Fravor was the F-18 pilot on the Nimitz that was sent out to find out what this stuff is. But and it wasn't just, I was talking to him recently, and it wasn't just a radar image. Commander Fravor had eyes on it for over 5 minutes watching this thing, as 4 other pilots did. So this wasn't a radar blip or anything. These guys were watching this thing. But, one of the things I think in the gimbal video, the way the craft that we worked on flies is it doesn't fly like a flying saucer would in a 1950s movie. It flies belly first. It may set down conventionally, but it always rotates. It doesn't roll maneuver, puts its belly towards the target, and then moves away at high speed.
Like a car flying with the wheels forward.
Right. I mean, it may land on the wheels, but at some point when it wants to leave, flips up, points the wheels where it wants to go and takes off. And the gimbal video, you can see the craft do the roll maneuver. And it's really interesting. It behaves exactly like the crafts that I worked on.
So much like we have different shaped aircrafts and fighter jets and cars, they probably have different shapes of these objects that operate under similar principles.
Right,
Perhaps.
but they all have the same power source.
They all have the same power source. And we're also dealing with, if you think about the laws of technological progression, you think of Moore's law, and you think of how things accelerate, you've got to think that if this civilization is who knows how many years more advanced than we are, if not even years, I mean we're thinking about it in terms of conventional terms, right? The way we look at the world. They might be just superior in terms of their intellect. They've got to be. Maybe. We don't know. Right?
Well, the only reason I say that is because, look, everyone doesn't necessarily start at a steam engine and go to an internal combustion engine and then, electric power, nuclear power, and go up the ladder that we came in. The binary, if the stuff is true about the origin of the binary star system, and they have heavier elements that we don't have, and this stable element 115 is a naturally occurring material, maybe that's the first thing they started experimenting with. And the version of their steam engine, their first product, was something that operated like this. And actually, when they came to Earth to look around, or whatever, they were amazed at the stuff we were doing. These guys burned stuff and squirted out the back to go forward. So, who says they follow any kind of normal progression?
My thought was, if you went back to the 1400s and then you went from 1400 to 1500, you're not going to see that much of a difference technologically. If you go from 2000 to 3000, I assume there's going to be a radical change.
Right. Well, the rate of change is magnificently higher than it used to be.
Right. So if you think about what they had in 1988, and you think about what they probably have in 2019, just logically, it seems like they would advance.
I would think so.
The only question is, are they living? Is that a living thing in terms of a biological thing, or are they some sort of an artificially created creation like we are working on right now? We're in the middle of working on artificial reality, silicon-based life form, essentially trying to create Boston Dynamics, or was it Boston Dynamics?
Robots, yeah. You can make machines out of flesh, right? So a cyborg or a cybernetic organism is just that, that's what a lot of people think those gray things are, that people know the rays.
Yeah.
It's they're machines did from flesh. So what you're saying is
well, they could just be synthetic life. They don't even need to be machines.
Well, they seem to have no sex organs. So we're describing that people that have had interactions with them assume these people are liars or crazy or whatever.
Right.
That they have no sex organs and that they don't seem to have any muscle. They're just almost like a frame, and they have enormous heads. I mean, if you look at Australopithecus or depictions of ancient hominids, and then you go to human beings, one of the things you see is bigger heads and weaker bodies.
Well, you see a clear progression of evolution too, where something like that, I would lean towards a synthetic organism because it looks like it was made for a specific task. There's no reproductive organs, so I mean that almost kind of leaves out any kind of physical evolution.
Right. That's also the bottleneck, right? Our bottleneck is our biological imperative. The need to breed, emotions, fear, anxiety, all these different things that exist in order to force us into making sure we reproduce. I mean, that's essentially the human reward systems that aren't necessary once they can figure out a way to make some sort of sentient artificial life. Some sort of thing that doesn't have these biological limitations that we have.
By the way, these craft, all these different kinds of organisms confusing. I always thought of flying saucers when I heard Bob Lazar talk about flying saucer, right? But if you look back in history, people have always reported the weirdest shapes. None of them are alike. And, there are the saucers, but you got cigar shaped, you got the top hat shaped. You have orbs. Why? Maybe they're serving different purposes. They're doing different things. Like we'd use different tools. And I want to be clear. The reason I know that memo is real is because I spent a lot of time with Dr. Edgar Mitchell, a 6-man who walked on the moon. Last guy to film him before he died, right? That's how I know I don't want any journalists thinking I got it from anywhere else. I know because of Dr. Mitchell. And he said the same thing. Maybe these things are performing different tasks, you know? And that's
Well,
why
they seem, if you think about what an alien is in terms of our the sort of iconic image of an alien, like the Steven Spielberg Close Encounters of the Third Kind alien, they seem like what we'd assume a human being would eventually become. And if these things are tiny, human beings are smaller than they've been before, they're weaker than they've ever been before, and there seems to be a trend in that direction. And this trend seems to be amplified by our technological progression. There are a lack of need for muscle strength and a lack of need for violence, and moving in a society to try to get away from all the things that we think are abhorrent about human beings and the terrible behaviors that we have. If we one day do give birth to some sort of an artificial being, like Marshall McLuhan's quote, "We are the sex organs of the machine world." You know, that one day we, yeah, McLuhan is brilliant. And that quote has always been one of my favorites because, okay, what are we doing when we're constantly technologically innovating? We're constantly looking for faster cars, better computers, bigger screens, faster, more resolution, more pixels, more this, more that, higher bandwidth, 5G, 10G. Right? What are we doing? We're moving into this, in this, if you just follow it objectively, stand back, don't attach yourself or your civilization, your culture to it, and look at what it is. We're moving 100% towards technological innovation. If you looked at this species from afar, if you weren't a part of it, you would say, well, what does this species do? Well, they make things. They make things better out here. Beehives are the same fucking thing that you see 10 years ago. You go by, you see a beehive, it's amazing, it's cool, but they're the same fucking thing. They figured out how to do it, they make a beehive. Right? We don't do that. We make better things. What would you constantly?
And at some point, I think that technology is going to fuse with us.
Yes.
It's going to become.
It's already happening.
Yeah.
Elon Musk talked about it on my podcast that we are cyborgs. You just carry it in your pocket. It's a phone. It answers any question you want. You can talk to it. It will give you the answers instantaneously. It navigates you. It has all your phone numbers in it. It has all your contacts. You can get a hold of people listening to you through it. It's connecting us in ways even involuntarily. Haptics, that kind of thing. Yeah. It's also getting on your wrists. How many people have iWatches, Apple Watches?
Well, right, and that's only because we can't integrate them yet. But you know that point is coming.
100%. Yeah, I didn't joke about it last night, but I haven't. About the integration between humans and technology.
What would you do to hyper intelligence, right? Would you do the work yourself, or would you create some cool things called like humans to do it for you? Would you create things that are cybernetic organisms to come in with machines and do it for you? If you are hyper intelligence that has kind of changed like you've described, you'd probably create workers, right?
Well, that's a vast conspiracy theory.
I'm not talking about conspiracy,
but it is a kind of conspiracy.
I'm asking.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily that. I mean, you could look at it that way, but that is the way conspiracy theorists would look at it. The way I would look at it is like there's obviously a progression going on, a biological progression. There's some sort of integration with technology. There's some sort of imperative, this need for technological innovation. It's inescapable. Everyone has it. And I think it's attached to materialism in some sort of a strange way because so many people work so hard to get new things. And like, God, that seems so illogical and preposterous, and it makes people unhappy. Depression's on the rise, but nobody seems to be able to stop it. And why is that? Well, maybe it's because we are the electronic caterpillars that give birth to the butterfly. Maybe that's what we're doing.
That could very well be.
What our job is to do is to make some sort of a cocoon. We don't even know we're doing it while we're doing it. Do you think a caterpillar is well, hey caterpillar, what are you doing? Man, I'm doing my thing, it's my job, I have to make a cocoon.
This could be a natural part of evolution.
It could be.
That we're just supposed to do this and make the jump to some sort of mechanized, non-biological.
An orangutan that is fishing with us with spears. There's primatologists.
Wait, without somebody showing them how to fish?
No, they've imitated human beings doing it. And now they do it, but they do it independently. They're not trained orangutans. They're wild orangutans do that. There's a wild orangutan.
Oh, yeah, that's impressive. That's impressive.
Well, there's these primatologists. Is we call them primatologists in this term?
That's great.
Biologists that believe that monkeys and chimps and some of the great apes are moving into the Stone Age. They've currently entered the Stone Age. Like, they're not staying what they were 100,000 years ago or 500,000 years ago, but they're actively using tools, and they're experimenting with different ways to use those tools. And then they're making tools out of stone, they're making tools out of sticks, and they're using them. Well, this might just be what happens. This might just be what happens. I mean, why else? Well, why the fuck? You work so hard. I mean, I was driving to LA this morning. I had a doctor's appointment, so I was on the 405 at 8 in the morning. But Jesus Christ, like this is so crazy. When you're on the 405 in LA at 8 o'clock in the morning, you see literally a million cars, and it's just everywhere you go, it's people. And also, I'm in a Tesla, so I have it on autopilot. So I'm there sitting, I'm listening to a podcast, and I barely have my hand on the wheel. I'm not touching shit. This car's driving me along. I'm not even doing anything. I'm just hanging out. It's so much less stress, by the way, to do it that way.
Right.
So it encourages you to innovate. It encourages you to embrace this new technology. I got this giant screen that's showing me navigation in front of me. Oh, I'll be there 5 minutes early. Excellent. And I'm listening to a podcast wirelessly. It's Bluetooth streaming from my phone, and I pulled that podcast, which came out today out of the fucking sky, and I'm listening to it, and I'm all comfortable in my nice little car, just driving on my way to the doctor's office.
This is irresistible stuff.
Yeah.
It's different than your Walkman.
Yeah,
You know,
it is irresistible. It is irresistible.
It's frighteningly irresistible.
But is it frightening? I mean, if you were
He's in search of something that perceives as and there is no answer. You know, the finding more of Jesus. It's a nice, beautiful day. Beautiful sunshine. And nice today is in the west.
Hell yeah, do you know Maggie May? Sally Rogers. I'm kicking ass and taking names. I just watched Joe Rogan, Bob Lazar, Jeremy Corbin interview, and I'm loving me some ufology. How about y'all? It is. I've seen it a bunch, but I just love watching it. I love the Bob Lazar story. I honestly think he's one of the great American heroes of all time. He doesn't get enough credit for the courage he had to blow the whistle on what was going on in S4, Area 51. Perhaps, I mean, we might not even know the term Area 51, but for Bob Lazar, I think George Knapp does a hell of a job getting disclosure out, Jeremy Corbell, so really anything about the secrets of Area 51 are very intriguing to me. So even though I've watched it a bunch, I'd like to watch it again. No, not at all. And I really think that his detractors point to, well, where's the record of him at MIT? Where's the record of him at Caltech? And it's very easy for those uh, educational institutions of higher education to essentially blacklist him if they want. If they want to continue getting funding, they just ensure that he's not on the record. When people tried to detract what he was saying when he went to Los Alamos, it turned out that he was in the telephone book there. I also think did a lot for ufology. Never believed this story, and that's fine. He's allowed to have his opinion. But I've been, focused on, or at least been aware of the Bob Lazar story for almost 30 years now, and it has remained 100% consistent, decade by decade. And maybe he's not the greatest speaker, and he doesn't like the limelight all that much, but he does what he can, and he did what he could to get out the information. I really feel like the government put him through a whole hell of a lot of things. I mean, he had his car shot at. He had to essentially the reason why he was essentially barred from the program was because his wife was having an affair and they were tapping his phone, and he had to learn about that from the government. I mean, that's a hell of a thing to have to learn from your bosses. And I really think that, this country's put him through the ringer. And, year in, year out, his stories remain consistent. I really think he has a nice little company going now, United Nuclear, and I wish the best for him. Actually, Kyle's had their hand up first. Kyle, why don't you go ahead? At least, at least. I'm in agreement with you, Logan. Especially, you get some characters in here, and you don't ban them. You give them the opportunity to speak, and I think that's very respectable. So, and you're very respectful to everyone. You're great host overall. And so, yeah, I'm with you on that one. When it comes to Bob Lazar, I think it's very interesting that he hasn't made money on his story. To my knowledge, whenever he does, it's only like $2,000, and he donates it to a school. He doesn't have a book out there. Like Jeremy Corbyn's the one who made the Netflix thing. It's not a Bob Lazar thing. He's a scientist essentially, and that's his passion. And I think that's very interesting. I think as well, something about which he's passionate is for young people to get into science and STEM. And essentially, there are laws out there that prevent young people from getting into it. You can't just, in some states, I don't know exactly all the laws, but like in Texas, I know I've heard him reference it. You can't buy like science kits, some science kits, because there was like the whole meth epidemic, and they didn't want people to basically be able to have access to some of the glassware. I think it's really unfortunate. I mean, if you're a young scientist or young person interested in science, you need those kinds of materials. And really, one of the things about Lazar, for which he argues, is that we need to get science back into the hands of young people, and so that they're interested in these things. And if that's basically the only thing I've ever heard him really, only heard him for which to advocate. Really, he doesn't make a lot of money on it. He's only been put through the ringer. People only basically criticize him. I think Element 115 will be considered Lazarian. I know it has a different name, but I mean, he's really the person out there who made people start to pay attention to the periodic table and those upper level. Unless you're a chemist, you don't know about Pentium. No one does, but he's the one who basically made people aware of, these kinds of things are out there. I think that he's literally just, I think very highly of him. And I mean, I'm not saying he's perfect by any means. He's made some really bad decisions, I think, in the past. I think like one time he set up a security system for a brothel, and he got in trouble with that. He brought his friends out in an RV to Area 51 when they were doing the tests. I'll say this. I've never gotten into ufology personally. I've only ever done it on the internet. But one time, I really wanted to know what was going on between John Lear, if you know who that is, and Gene Huff. Basically, John Lear was a friend of Bob Lazar. His father was the inventor of the Learjet, and Gene Huff was like a real estate appraiser. And basically, they were Bob's friends. And they got into an argument one time, and I read through their emails and I read through their communications, and really just saw that Gene Huff, in my opinion, was somewhat immature with his communications with John Lear. And I one time emailed John Lear and just told him that, from a neutral point of view of someone who's interested in the topic, I really thought that he handled it in a much more professional, much more mature manner. And wouldn't you know it, John Lear got back to me right away and just said, "Thank you, and you made my day." That's the only communication my entire life, for as interested in ufology as I am, that I've ever had with someone actually who was like, somewhat newsworthy in the movement. And yeah, I just think that's kind of an interesting story. Bicycle race by Queen. Crazy Little Thing Called Love by Freddie Mercury. We are. It was very good. I really think that there is a divide between the monarchy and the British people. And I really think that it's unfortunate. I saw a statistic. There are more food banks in England than there are McDonald's. And this is all from in the last few decades or so. So I'm definitely in agreement with you that perhaps the British Empire, I'm not saying the sun has set upon it. I still think it's a very, very strong, Commonwealth is very, very strong. My question is this: I'm sure some people in here are aware of David Icke and his theories regarding the royal family, and essentially what brings this to mind is I saw some coronation posters on Twitter, and somebody had vandalized them, making the king and queen consort into reptilians. Basically, what are your thoughts on the monarchy being reptilians? I'm a new guy. I think it's very interesting. I've heard two, in addition to just like the David Icke videos. Well, let me say this. I've seen one of them that it's called like I'm Jewish by DNA. I'm Jewish by my actions. I got it every single day on camera, like no other rabbis doing this. And I can speak for Judaism on this one subject. At least this one documentary that I saw that basically was it was like a BBC one of the like offshoots of the BBC that basically they interviewed David Icke and this is in the early noughts or the early 2000s. And basically, they say that essentially when he talks about the people who run the world, he says that they're lizard people, that they're reptilians, and the Anti-Defamation League and other like Southern Poverty Law Center come out and say, "Oh, when you say that, that's anti-Semitic." It's like that has nothing to do with Judaism. Absolutely nothing to do with Judaism. I feel it's a way to shut him up and shut up people who want to essentially attack people in power, but it doesn't have anything to do with Judaism. And I think that sometimes people try to label people who try to attack the monarchy. But two quick stories. So one of them, I think it was at Prince William and Kate Middleton's their wedding or some event leading up to that. The Queen was essentially like at Westminster Abbey or something, some public event, and she shapeshifted. Like people will talk about her shapeshifting, and like that's why she wears gloves and you never see her hands or feet and these other things. Anyways, allegedly, like these are just interesting stories that I don't know how much credibility that you can put in it, but essentially all these people tweeted out about it, and there was a complete blackout on Twitter, and it was the first time I had ever heard about Twitter ever having a complete blackout where people from a certain radius could not tweet out about information. And I did see the tweets, some of them that had been screenshotted and then passed on once people got outside this certain radius. That's one story I heard about. Another story I heard about this kind of idea of like when you get to these certain levels of society. Adele, the artist Adele, had a concert, and she had people who won some kind of like get to meet Adele backstage kind of contest. So they're there with Adele, and Adele sits with them, and she's like, "I just like we're really big fans, right?" And they're like, "Yeah, we love you. We won this contest and everything." And she's like, "Well, I have something to share with you. I'm not fully human." And she shapeshifted in front of him, scared the shit out of these kids. And essentially, like, those are the only two times I've ever heard of anybody like getting that on any kind of having like even any kind of stories about this. We don't hear about this in the United States. Like I hear about Biden having like a clone or like maybe having died and they have a new guy there or he's an actor. I hear that kind of stuff, but I never hear that he's a reptilian. Really, you only start to get into these reptilian discussions when you get into monarchy. And if anything, the bloodlines there are very interesting. They're not really Windsor, they're Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, and basically every major head of European monarchies can trace themselves back to Queen Victoria, and Queen Victoria allegedly had relations with, I'm not sure which Rothschild, but some Rothschild, and so essentially those are like, essentially the heads of the European state. I just find it like these stories to be very interesting. I don't know how much credibility I can put in them. I think David Icke, though, particularly is very brave for coming out and saying what he did. I believe he did it on Logan, like I don't know, in the early '90s, perhaps, during his teal period. But people want to throw him under the bus, and people want to discredit what he has to say. But at the end of the day, he talks about people in power having too much power and trying to give power back to the people. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. Go ahead, Guy.